Hello and hey, today we're messing around with Path of Exile, this time a 3.25 Settlers of Calgur Summon Reaper build. I almost said Cowgirl so hard there. Let's immediately talk about why you would or why you would most certainly not play this build. Starting with why you wouldn't play this, you like clear speed. You don't like pressing a lot of buttons. You don't like having many skills in the same archetype being better and or cheaper than yours. You don't like clunky builds. You don't like having to constantly resummon minions. And you like clear speed. And why you would play this, you like her. Really. And some satisfying single target. The goal of this build is to provide a budget-minded version of Summon Reaper that can tackle all content, but it requires a little bit of buy-in from you, the viewer. This is thought of as a low-tier skill. It's not going to do all content well. For this, it just needs to technically be able to perform the task. I have done Deathless Ubers, 250% T17s, and Wave 15 of every simulacrum. That layer of content just above T16 mapping strategies, but below actual juicing. And honestly, for the price of admission, I'm pretty happy with the skill. You run into some problems trying to scale damage beyond this, mostly giving up defenses almost no matter how much you spend to pump the damage. And it's not hard to double what I'll show you, but there is a trade-off cost. I'm getting ahead of myself, and we'll get to that. Starting with leveling, not with this skill. Although the skill gem becomes available at level 28, this is not a skill you should go through the campaign with. And as someone who has league started it several times, this is not a skill an overwhelming majority of you should be league starting at all. It's not a player skill issue or a knowledge issue. It just doesn't perform until you've gathered basic levels of gear, all of which is much more expensive at the start of a league. It is a later in the league type of build, any way you slice it. And a quick side, a warning to anybody that doesn't know, with the Desecrate changes this league, if you're like me and leveled with Spectres, because that's a reasonable thing to level a witch with, you will be unable to rid them from your pool, and if you're willing to use support Spectres later, it will be much more tedious to replenish them when, not if, when the Reaper eats them almost every map. Just meaning, if you plan to use support Spectres later, never summon anything other than those Spectres. This is a weird restriction. I can't think of anything else in the game that you cannot level and change later. I imagine this will be addressed in the future, but for now, it's insanely annoying. So while I do not have an official suggestion on how to level, be careful and probably reconsider if leaning Spectres. But with all that negativity out of the way, see, you can't call me bait. I've been warning you. This build's kind of awesome. With the should be tier 0 shield Sphalen, I don't know how to pronounce it, and like 5 points on the passive tree, we're sitting at 88 block. Our Reaper creeps up into 8-digit damage. You can automate parts of it. It does get kind of comfy. Not great, still not fast, but sort of comfy. The small investment needed for the immense block means we can invest into some actual mitigation without needing to sack our entire damage to do so. It's no secret that Witch's defenses are struggling at the moment, but we can manage something a little more durable than the wet paper bag that a lot of Necromancers end up as once you get through the block. And we can do all this for pretty cheap. 1C weapon, 5C belt, 5C gloves, 10C boots, 20C amulet. Even the overpowered shield can be picked up for about a half div. And the mods on the other 4 pieces of rare gear aren't restrictive, expensive, nor strapped too tightly. Life and res, and if you can snag an attribute on top, that's icing on the cake. Awakened gems and some of these jewels can start to add up if you're going for the best of the best, but if you're willing to accept a couple percentage points lower, and especially if you're going to level some of the gems yourself, it's a huge saving on the total cost of the build. So let's go through the gear slot by slot and talk about what we're looking at and why we're using what we're using, or what we would be using before we get there. Starting with the weapon, this is a fairly juicy wand, definitely more expensive than advertised. Plus 2 minions, 128% increased minion damage, because in order to beat the cheap unique, we needed something a little spicy like this. Cold Iron Point is like a 4% difference, and it's only 1 or 2C. We do lose the trigger, but I'll tell you when we get to skills that that's not as big of a deal as it would normally be. Over to shield, the incomparable Sphalen, still don't know how to say it, new this league and overtuned as hell. Chance to block is lucky is incredible. You've likely heard that from anybody who has seen this, but you're going to hear it again. You're technically reduced to a 65% block cap, but when reached, it is actually a plus 13 to block cap, and for some reason is giving you a flat amount of spell block as well. Even a 10% roll is ridiculous. 15s are too expensive for the scope of this build, but each percentage does become more valuable if you're not hitting cap. And if that's too expensive, Cold Iron Point can go in both slots. You're suddenly getting hit by like 4 times the amount of attacks and even more spells, but it's not like 54-42 block is unplayable, and you're getting a sizable boost to damage as the kicker. There's an argument to be made if you're not farming T17s, that you just do this and keep it cheap. Down to the helmet, ignore the perfect tier reservation implicit. This build does not take advantage of that. The 7% lesser implicit will work. We are looking for +2 to minion skill gems, and as much life as we can afford, everything else is a bonus. With an open suffix, a hybrid elemental chaos resistance benchcraft is the most likely play. For body armor, the Exarch implicit for increased effect of offerings is big, but not strictly necessary. Again, we want big life, and then if you can afford, flat fizz reduction, maybe a straight up chaos res roll, again, ending with a hybrid benchcraft. If you're looking for an offensive boost from this slot, anything with plus levels really works. I had a Skin of the Loyal giving me +3 gems for a bit, and there's also +2 or +3 Corrupted Diala's Malefaction if you just don't have a budget. Gem levels are king, and this slot is a great way to get them, but you're going to trade defenses and a lot of divines for it. In gloves, we've got the staple Athanath's Gentle Touch. Clear without these is horrendous. They make it so you have to cast a curse on every pack, but at least 95% of the pack will get popped instead of not clearing half of it because you misclicked your 4-second cooldown main skill. The quality of life is huge. You can swap these gloves for bossing if you're feeling particularly sweaty, but they're completely fine to leave on. Boots are actually a mandatory unique, the Tempest Rising from Uber Cirrus no less, yikes. The line, you and enemies in your presence count as moving while affected by elemental ailments, is the star of the show, effectively tripling our damage. We have only a third of our damage without these if the enemy is not moving or aggravated. We do have some chance to aggravate via vulnerability, but there's downtime with that, and none of the rolls on this item really matter. You absolutely do not need an Endurance Charge Corrupt either. I just had the currency and saw a good price, so I went for it. The amulet, no surprise, Replica Dragonfang's Flight. Buy one with 9% efficiency or better. Do not divine for it. It will reroll the gem. 9% is not strictly necessary, but it fits many more breakpoints. You might need an extra % or 2 from a jewel or your helmet implicit if you get a lower one, is all I'm saying. I like Disciple of the Unyielding for the Anoint. It's cheap, gives a minimum endurance, and keeps them up during mapping, as all the pops and bleed kills are attributed to you. I very much enjoy it. Can see even a majority of others opting for other anoints, however, so play it as you like. For rings, the Profane Proxy you see here is for quality of life from Forbidden Flesh and Flame Jewels that are really expensive compared to the build. You can leave it on if you're okay with Frost Blinking and having a hitting elemental skill in your Svalin. Otherwise, fix your resists with the rare, or even get some damage with a Bone Ring. This is your most flexible slot. Like every other rare, you want life and resists, and anything else is a bonus. For the belt, none other than Darkness Enthroned. Unless you've got some Giga Jewels, don't worry about getting a high rolled one. Anything over 67% is fine. It's cheap enough, and you can snag a roll in the 70s for about the same price as a minimum roll. The reason you'd want 67% or more is because we need bleed chance on the Reaper. If both of your Ghastly Eye Jewels have 15% chance to bleed, you don't need any quality on Reaper, nor to curse to get a guaranteed bleed. Caveats being if the attack actually hits and the mod to avoid bleeds isn't on the encounter. But 15% jewels turn into 25%, so that's what you're looking for. Later on, if you get a high rolled one and quality on your Reaper gem, you can have just a single jewel with the affix. I'm using mine for strength and dex to save points on the tree, also something to look out for. And to further that point, Aminamu's Gaze, maximum of 30% multi, is not affected by the belt. However, the number of jewels you need to reach the maximum is. So that same 67% affix would make it so you only need 3 jewels to reach cap, which can be good if you're short on jewels, points, and or sockets. It's a 1.5 divine upgrade right now, and is all of that 30% more damage boost it says on the tin. Absolutely worth getting. Flasks, pretty standard. I have Quartz for phasing, Quicksilver for movement, Granite for armor, and I like the Sulfur for its long duration, regen from Consecrated Ground, and mine has 50% chance to avoid stun. I think it's a Katarina mod, so it might be a little bit tougher to get. If you wanted to splurge on like a Progenesis, that's all you. I tried one for a bit, but did not feel like I got a 40 divine upgrade to my build, so I sold it back off. Flasks are always more personal though, it's up to you. For a life flask, I like instant on low life for this build, just throwing that out there. And finally, jewels. I'll try to speed through this a bit. Have the 3rd Ghastly Eye jewel we need for Aminamu's cap. Life, minions deal increased damage if you used a minion skill recently is usually the prized mod. Adjust how many stats you have on the jewel to your budget, but late into a league, you actually get some pretty good steals. The Cluster Jewel, a 12 passive eye levels, 84, 35% increased effects. They're generally overpriced. This is a later upgrade, so if you find a good deal on one, get it. But if you buy a base, rolling the 35% increased effect isn't that rare, so it can be a little project for you. Or you can just get a lesser passive, lesser eye level one with 25% increased effect and end up nearly as good. 35% is usually big for tier 1 attack and cast speed, but since those are just luxury stats on this build, it's not as huge. You'd feel the difference, but justifying the cost could be difficult. I am using an impossible escape to fit in Malevolence. 24% increased mana reservation efficiency for 3 or 4 points, depending on how you want to look at it. Quite good. The Supreme Ego version I'm using is only a single divine. Really more of a why not after I saw that price. I have a jewel with Corrupted Blood immunity, life, and 3% attack block. This saves me taking a single point in the tree, so those 3 things combined make this a great deal. It is a rare combo though, so you'll probably have to give up the life roll, but that's usually the concession for going cheap. We come down to the potentially big ticket items. Profane Bloom is great for the comfiness of the build. You barely have to press buttons to run through maps, which for Reaper is wild. But don't let me oversell it. Like, don't let me oversell it. You can get a similar effect with Frost Blinking and like Absolution in your Sphalim. It's noticeably worse, but very noticeably cheaper, as the jewels are about 40 div right now for the set. I like Bastion of Elements as a replacement. It's not cheap, as anywhere from 3 to 6 divs depending on the hour, but Primal Aegis boosts our max hit by a ton. Feels good to not see your health move at all, and it refreshes every 4 seconds without taking damage, meaning for the most part, it's up. Between the Aegis effect and Steelskin, your health bar doesn't see a lot of action, and that is a great thing. And the last jewel we've socketed, a Fortress Covenant. Don't sweat the high roll. You can grab a 38, 39%er for about 40 chaos right now, with max damage roll being like 3 or 4 divines. Not worth the difference. We use it for the damage, of course, socket it in a cluster jewel to avoid the downside, and also make use of the block for minions because of our pumped up bone offering. It's even more value. Just great stats all around. Not that big of a cost later in a league. Get you one. That's everything we got equipped. There's further possibilities to shove in another 25% aura if you get a reservation small cluster, and or interesting options with some unique megalomaniacs. And to be precise, I'd say unique, but mean rare combinations that might not exist on the market. There's a lot you can do. From what I played around with, I like what I've got for simplicity and effectiveness. I was kind of getting lost in the sauce, searching for more, and it honestly became less fun, so I pulled it back, and this is what I'm presenting. But again, not the only options. Doesn't take much adjusting from the little gear that I have in the POB to see that damage number really jump, or you can tank Uber Shaper Slams with the aspect of the crab. Play around, find something you like. Alright, done with the slog of equipment, we'll go over gems and then get you out of here with a quick T17. In the Reaper itself, Awakened Minion Damage, Awakened Brutality, Awakened Swift Affliction, Awakened Melee Physical Damage, and Awakened Deadly Ailments. It's almost an extension of equipment, as this is where the bulk of your budget will go if you're buying level 5, 20 quality gems. Minion damage is the most important one to get first for that extra level at Reaper, but everything else you can level yourself just to save some currency. Take a look at the damage from non-awakened. It is a big drop off from 13.5 with this gear all the way down to 8.8, but that's okay. They're all linear upgrades at around the same cost, so you just upgrade when you can. Bone Offering, the highest level, can be the difference between block cap and not, but it's not like you're going to fall over if the accumulation of all your gear and Bone Offering is only 84, 82. Still massive block, but this is the driving force of the block, so we always want it up. You may choose to opt for more duration as a support, particularly if you're still on the Cold Iron Point setup. 26.5 seconds isn't too bad, better than most Divine Blessing setups when we had those. And that's what I meant when I said it wasn't too bad to lose the trigger. There's also a lot of power in not triggering a 1 corpse offering without being able to beef it up for 16 seconds in a less cooldown recovery map. So it's not all bad to have this. Our auras are Summon Skitterbots, which is very important to apply Elemental Ailment for our Boots triple damage mod to actually work. Make sure you have that. Pride, which gives more physical damage taken. Malevolence, more damage over time, skill effect duration. And Purity of Elements, massive amount of resistance and immunity to elemental ailments, including the alternate ones. Sum it up, that's 3 50%ers and a 35%, not too bad. We have our Summon Skeleton set up with Feeding Frenzy, Maim, and Summon Phantasm. They make for great buff, debuff, and health pots for our main minion. Throwing a group of 4 down is almost never a bad use of your time. For utility, I'm using an automated Steelskin. That's just for me to push less buttons. I don't recommend automating Convocation, however, as you can very easily pull your Reaper away from her target mid-ultimate, which after you do it a couple times, it's annoying. But if it doesn't bother you, 1 less button. Perfect. Desecrate is more important to me than those that will forego Raise Zombie, Raise Spectre, though you'll still want it for at-will Bone Offering fodder. Raise Zombie and Raise Spectre are totally optional. I like zombies to minorly help with clear, but more so to give permanent additional physical reduction via the Bone Barrier Ascendancy node, and to become food for Reaper over Spectres, as otherwise the Spectres will get chomped down every single map, and it's hard enough to justify the effort as it is. The Spectres I'd use, top choice would be Demon Harpy. If you had just 1 Spectre in your pool, you could come out of a map with linked Spell Echo, get them replenished very quickly between maps. It wouldn't be that painful. Pale Seraphim could also be thrown into that mix. You could still grab a mix of them without too much hassle, but again, a lot of people are really not going to enjoy that, so it's not necessary. Other skills I've got are Summon Chaos Golem, which at 2020 gives 6% flat phys reduction. It's a minor difference, probably one of the first gems to go if you're facing socket pressure, but I like it. Enduring Cry, great for regen for us and our minions, and on-demand endurance charges while bossing. We have only Frost Blink as a travel skill. It's going to be heresy to some to hold a shield and not use shield charge. You're free to. It was a choice because of the number of buttons I wanted to press. We have Vulnerability as our curse, as stated back when talking about Athanaths. Get chance to bleed, increase physical damage, and chance to aggravate. 2 of those stats become less useful after we get boots and proper jewels, but increased damage is always great. And Absolution. I don't socket this all the time, but when socketed in Valen, helps apply curse for Athanath pops, food for Reaper so that she doesn't eat our other buff givers, and not terrible aid to our clear. In less recovery maps, this skill will starve your ES pool out unless you have the safeguard notable for some reason. So there is a downside to it. It's just always give and take. Of course, that's not the only options. If you wanted Vol Haste, Detonate Dead for the Elemental's Phelan skill, or many others, feel free to experiment. I tried a lot, but I have not tried all, so just see what you like and play that. Alright, we'll slap you into a fairly tame T17. Mods are more than double life and 35% less defenses, which is the biggest problem to our mana pool more than anything else. It will go to cast Reaper and not have it, so the damage might look a little poor just because I'm out of rhythm. But like I said, very tame, very low chance of dying. Any questions, I will be more than happy to address them in the comments. I know that I have forgotten something, so check the pinned comment for clarification or additional information. Path of building in the description, all that fun stuff. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Be safe, guys.